Hold on. Did you actually think I was crazy enough to spend countless hours of the time I have to read every Wimpy Kid book and watch every Wimpy Kid movie? If you thought I was about to sit here and make some stupid video about the Wimpy Kid series, then you're absolutely right. Oh yeah, major spoilers ahead. I'm really about to rate every single Wimpy Kid book. Alright, before we do this, let's set some ground rules. So on the tier list I have here is every book, but there are some books here that don't actually count. Rowley Adventures and Rowley Spooky Stories and also the Do-It-Yourself book don't actually count as real books. Well, the Rowley books do count, I'm just too lazy to actually read them. Anyways, without further ado, let's begin in Diary of Wimpy Kid Book 1. So, Diary of Wimpy Kid is probably one of the best books in here by default. I mean, this is the book that literally started it all. That's not to say it's the best book though.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I do still think that this book is one of my favorites because of how I grew up reading this book and how I grew up watching the movies. But rereading it, I was kind of underwhelmed. The main factor as to why this book ranks so high is because it's the original book that Jeff Kinney wrote, so I kinda have to put it here. Everyone's probably going to get mad at me, but I don't think this is the best book out of the series. In my defense, I do think it's a little bland at first. I'm not even saying this book sucks, I'm just saying that Jeff's writing has evolved so much that this book doesn't barely compare to the other books. In terms of story, this might rank low, but because it's the original, of course I have to give it praise. Without the book, we wouldn't have the series, and that gives this book an S tier. Alright, so Rodrick Rules. Rodrick Rules is a great book. I really like it because it's a book focused around Rodrick. And Rodrick is probably my favorite character out of the whole series. He's relatable, funny, and most of all, he's actually normal. Come to think of it, everyone else in the family is just going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. A lot of what happened in this book also happened in the movie, but the book has a lot to offer as well. The book also has the absolute classic story of Rodrick performing in his school talent show while his mom danced and took all the attention from him. It was great in the book, but it's also great in the movie. This book also feels really fresh with everything that happens, and best of all, it's one of the funniest Wimpy Kid books I've ever read. Everything about this book is great, therefore it's gonna get an S tier. Book 3, The Last Straw. Alright, The Last Straw is one of my favorite books in the whole series. It might not be as good as some other books like Rodrick Rules or The Meltdown, but it's definitely a book that's very nostalgic to me. I also think that this book is better than Cabin Fever by a bit. A lot of the book focuses on Greg Heffley trying to build his relationship with his father, and a lot of the book is also spent setting up the events that happen in the future, which I guess makes sense. A lot of the jokes here really land, and I think that the reason why this is so nostalgic to me is because a lot of the scenes from the Dog Days movie is actually from this book. Even though it's technically the third book in the series, but Dog Days is the third book out of the original Wimpy Kid series. Another weird thing about this book is the fact that in the last few pages they mentioned this girl called Trista, which was meant to serve as some sort of love interest for Greg in the next book, which was Dog Days. I mean, this makes sense because the book ends on summer vacation, but throughout the entirety of Dog Days, this character is just nowhere to be found. Aside from that, this book's pretty good. I am going to give it an A tier. I do still think that Double Down is better. Alright, Dog Days. So, Dog Days was a pretty solid book. The book didn't have a progressive story throughout like some other books, and the theme of this one was that it took place during Greg's summer vacation. Although, don't go looking at the title thinking it's about dogs, because while Greg does get a dog in this book, the dog appears only in a few pages and is never mentioned and heard from ever again. In this book, there's also the classic Greg using a Rowley because he's a sociopath that happens in basically every book, and especially in Rowley's journal. I do have to admit, I felt a little bad for Rowley's dad when Greg and Rowley ordered drinks without knowing you actually had to pay for them. Don't really have much to say. I'd say this book gets a B tier. The movie was good, the book was good, it's great. Anyway, so let's move on. The Ugly Truth. Alright, so The Ugly Truth wasn't that bad of a book. It's got a lot going on in it, and I do think that it had potential. I just think that it just wasn't as memorable as some other books in the series. I do like the premise of Greg going through puberty and the ending where they had to go to school for a lock-in. The whole concept was really fun, but I do think that this book could have been way better. I do feel like the lock-in was a good idea, but it was just executed a bit poorly. I also like the story of how Greg had to keep an egg safe. Unfortunately, that egg didn't really last that long. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't hate this book because the writing is all over the place and it doesn't have just one consistent theme throughout the whole book. I actually enjoy it when the writing is all over the place and that there wasn't one long story like in The Last Straw. Except the difference is that The Last Straw is done well, since the theme of that book was Greg trying to mend his relationship with his father. It's not one big story like the one in The Meltdown or The Getaway. It's just something that Greg tries to do while dealing with his regular life, same with Hard Luck. Although I still do think that this book is really good, it definitely for sure deserves a B tier. Although Dog Days is probably still better than this though. Okay, Cabin Fever. Cabin Fever was a pretty good book. There's some nice arcs and stories in here, like Greg and Rowley trying to start their own holiday bazaar and Greg and Rowley vandalizing the school by accident. I have to say though, I read this book a really long time ago and just read it again recently, and I was actually surprised at how good the book was. I think this is a classic in the Wimpy Kid franchise, and it definitely deserves an A tier. I also really like how it was Christmas themed, so there was snow and it locked the Heffley family inside their own house with no food. The only thing I didn't like was Manny, and let's be honest, this kid is literally a spawn from hell. I think this book deserves an A tier. Anyways, on to the next book. Diary of Wimpy Kid Third Wheel is well, it's not as bad as some of the other books. Okay, let's get straight to the point. Basically, for the whole duration of this book, Greg tries to get girls to go with him to the Valentine's school dance and just ended up failing and getting rejected. I mean, I guess he deserved it. Greg Heffley is pretty much an incel and a simp after all. But that's not to say that this book sucked. I won't say it's that bad, because this book actually made me laugh in a few of the pages. The part where Greg, Rowley, and Abigail went together on a date made me really feel bad for Greg, but at the same time, as Greg suffers, you kind of feel he deserves it. I mean, the kid is literally a sociopath after all, and by sociopath, I mean he's not canonically a sociopath, but all the signs are showing. If you don't get what I mean, you can go watch the video done by Monkey Jones. Anyways, I'm getting off topic, so let's just wrap this up. This book definitely deserves a C tier in my opinion. It's definitely at that level where it's better than Getaway, but it's not at that level yet where it can beat good books like Ugly Truth. Alright, next book. Hard Luck is probably my favorite or second favorite out of the whole series. And before you ask, no, it's not because this was the first ever book I read in the whole series. Okay, maybe that has to contribute with me ranking this so high, but hear me out. This book slaps. Alright, and in a good way. Every joke lands, everything is accurate, and another reason why I liked it so much is that it's the direct sequel to Third Wheel. A lot happens in this book that gets successfully concluded the more you keep reading the book. The friendship between Greg and Rowley, the science project, the diamond ring, it all adds up in the end. We still have the cliffhanger of Greg hiding the diamond ring to save it for future use. I hope that Jeff Kinney doesn't forget about that, because it could seriously pay off later. I also love the magic 8-ball and the events that happened when Greg got it. It brought him good decisions, bad decisions, and also found him Meemaw's diamond ring. This book is definitely S tier. If I didn't grow up reading this book, I probably would have ranked it lower, but it's just way too nostalgic. I don't blame you if you disagree with me on this one. Alright, book 9, The Long Haul. So, The Long Haul is a book. It's not a bad book, but it's not a great book. And I'm not saying it's one of the best either. It's okay, but not bad enough to be deep end level bad. And let me just set this straight for the record. This book is so much better than the movie. The movie took out some really good parts of the book and instead replaced them with But anyways, this is the very first book in the series which focuses on one story throughout the whole book. And it should have stayed that way until Jeff Kinney ran out of ideas! Hey Jeff Kinney, call me. Anyways, even though this book is an awful movie, some parts of the book are still present in it. Like deep fried butter on a stick, the beardos, the stupid pig for some reason. Hey man, the pig is just as bad as Manny was in the book, or technically in any book. I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone when I say that Manny is a literal gremlin from hell. And this book is not bad. This book gets a B tier. Okay, book 10, Old School. Old School is a pretty good book. I don't know why, but I've met so much people who actually told me that they didn't like this book. But if I'm gonna be frank with you, the only thing I didn't like this book was Greg's mom. Like, holy crap, is she a hypocrite? Other than that, I really like the idea of this book, of the town going electronics free, Greg going to hardscrabble farms to avoid his father, also Greg starting a lemonade stand. These are all fresh ideas, and I feel like they're done really well in this book. I especially like the idea of hardscrabble farms and Scylla Scratch. I think they did that really well. This book is probably one of my favorites, and I do think I would rank it higher, but I don't think this book beats Hard Luck. One thing they did do right in this book is the concept of going electronics free. Anyways, this book gets an A tier. I still do think that Double Down's better than this book though. And speaking of Double Down. Okay, so a lot of people think that this book sucks, and I can understand where they're coming from. There's not really a certain theme for this book. It just kind of feels like the story is all over the place. But believe me or not, that's what makes me like this book even more. The fact that there's not really a theme for this book. Aside from Halloween, of course. It just makes it better, in my opinion. The reason why I feel like books with no stories are better than the books with one story throughout the whole book are better is that if the story of the book sucks, then the whole book just sucks altogether. There are still some things I hate about this book, like the stupid pig incident and Greg lying about a fake bully. But if that was the theme for the whole book, I would have definitely hated it more. I probably don't make a lot of sense, but the fact that this is essentially just multiple stories and themes combined into one book without a consistent story makes it more enjoyable to read than other books like Wrecking Ball. That, and this was also my second book I ever bought from this whole series. I especially love the part where Greg and Rowley try to make a movie. It happens at the very last pages of the book, but that doesn't make the quality of the story degrade. If you haven't read it yet, basically Greg thinks he can become famous by making a cheap horror movie. He invites Rowley to play all the characters, they write a script, act, and it goes horribly wrong. It's like classic Wimpy Kid structure. How could you not like it? Anyways, I do actually see why people hate this book so much. And it's just my opinion that I even like this book, so don't attack me in the comments. This book gets an easy A tier. Okay, The Getaway. The Getaway was not that bad of a book. However, the more you read it, the more you actually realize that Jeff Kinney is slowly running out of ideas for more Wimpy Kid books. This is also more of a story-driven book rather than a normal book. What I mean by story-driven is that throughout the whole book there's an ongoing story, and the story here is that Greg and his family go on a holiday to a hotel, which I'll give to Kinney. That's a fresh idea and everything, but we've already seen the whole Greg's family goes on a holiday for the whole book shtick around 3 times throughout the whole series. The first time it was actually good, but when they do it over and over again, the structure of the book starts to feel the same. It just goes, so Greg's mom forces them to go on a holiday, and then things went horribly wrong. The end. Overall, I'm going to rank this book lower than a lot of books at a C tier. The Meltdown. Alright, so Diary of Wimpy Kid The Meltdown is probably my 3rd favorite book out of the whole series. I won't say that it's like every other Wimpy Kid book, because this book has some really great structure in it. It's got some nice anecdotes and stories while also being a story of its own. Throughout the whole book, there's a snow arc, but don't confuse this with the other snow-themed Wimpy Kid book, because I honestly think that The Meltdown does it way better than Cabin Fever. Everything falls into place perfectly. I love how there's a huge snowball war between the upper and lower Surrey Street, and I also love the plans that Greg and Rowley used to triumph against them. Greg and Rowley went to extreme lengths to win the snowball fight, and it was actually really fun to see. The story here feels like it's not exactly real though. With all the stuff that's been happening, it all seems too unbelievable. However, that didn't stop me from enjoying this book. I'm pretty sure I'm not doing this book that much justice by reviewing it here, so you should definitely read it for yourself. This book deserves an S tier just for the whole snowball war arc. Alright, Wrecking Ball. So, Wrecking Ball is, it's okay, you know? I know I sound like a broken record when I say this, but I like the concept. The one thing that I don't like about this book is how they leave you on a cliffhanger, but yeah, it's not that bad. It takes a couple of pages to get into the actual story, but it does eventually pay off in the deep end, which is a direct sequel to this. Another thing that you will start to notice with the newer Wimpy Kid books is that Jeff Kinney has completely one-upped the art style. I mean, just looking at the first page alone makes it hard to believe that this whole book was written and drawn by some middle schooler. If Greg Heffley was a real kid, then my god, this kid would be making an absolute bank with his drawings. Shit! Anyways, back to the actual book. There's not a whole lot to say about the story. It's definitely new and has never been done before, but the crazier these stories get, the more unrelatable the books become. Like, when have you ever been in a situation wherein a hot tub falls through the roof of your house? I mean, you might as well title the book series The Crazy Adventures of Greg and His Family. But having a non-relatable story completely removes the feeling of this book belonging to a middle school wimp trying to write books. But some people still enjoyed reading Deep End, so who am I to spite them because of their opinion? This book deserves a B tier tops. The Deep End. So, The Deep End is one of the weirdest books in the whole Wimpy Kid series. I don't even know what to say about this book. It's just so damn forgettable. It's basically just another long haul ripoff, except it's just worse than any other book I read. If you thought The Getaway was a long haul ripoff, no. This book is literally just Jeff Kinney running out of ideas. And another thing that really struck me on this book is how unbelievable the story is. One thing that makes the Wimpy Kid book series stand out against other books is that it's relatable. In this book, Greg Heffley and his family straight up just ride their car into a bridge with Manny steering the wheel. What the hell is this? The other plotline is Greg Heffley teaming up with his group of friends in the compound hotel thing. It definitely reminds me of the Meltdown, but the Meltdown was good because you could actually see yourself having a snowball fight. How the hell does someone see themselves in the Heffley situation at the end of the book? It just makes no sense. This book deserves an E tier. Even Rowley's book could probably rank higher than this. Alright, let's move on to the movies. Diary of Wimpy Kid, the first one. Alright, let me just say, this movie is an absolute classic. Everything in this movie is perfect, the cast is perfect, Rodrick is perfect, the parents are perfect, Manny's actor perfectly captures him being a spawn from Satan! Everything's great, you know? I also love how they reference the ending to this movie to a chapter in Rowley's journal. This is a great movie, but it's not the best out of the whole trilogy, and I'm not including the fourth movie. We'll get to that later though. I also really like this scene in the movie where Greg and Rowley go trick-or-treating and accidentally scrap up some teenager's car. And this scene where Greg and Fregley have a sleepover. Everything about it is so good, even though they don't even happen in the book. Honestly, the only thing I found weird about this movie was that they introduced this photographer girl as a supporting character. I have no problem with her in the movie, but I just thought it was weird because we've never seen her in the books. So yeah, this movie gets a solid S tier. Moving on. Rodrick Rules is the best out of the 4 movie adaptations we've gotten from the Wimpy Kid franchise so far, or at least in my opinion. I love everything in this movie. Everything feels great, the scenes feel fresh and funny, even though some of them were taken straight out of the book itself. I also love the little arc that Greg and Rodrick go through to realize that maybe having them as brothers weren't too bad. I love this scene where Rodrick teaches Greg tips on how to make life easier, and also this moment in the talent show where Greg and Rowley turn their magician act into an accidental comedy. And let's not forget Rodrick's song Exploded Diaper. But even better was the acting. Holy crap, there is nothing better than the acting in this masterpiece. This movie is better than all the movies combined. For that, I feel like it deserves an S tier by default. Alright, Dog Days. This right here is a certified hood classic. I'd even argue that this is better than the original movie. The movie, like the book, was summer themed and everything about it is perfect as always. There are some pretty good scenes in there, like Greg Heffley jumping off a diving board and leaving his shorts there. I mean, what can you say? This dude's some Mr. Bean type fella. I also love the ending probably more than I love anything else in this movie, where we get a cover of Justin Bieber's Baby by the man Devin Bostic himself. The ending is so well deserved with Greg and Holly holding hands. See, this is the type of thing that is done well because you feel like Greg actually earned it. Unlike in Third Wheel where he gets screwed over by every single girl possible. This scene is also one of my favorites where Greg tells Rodrick that his band could play at Heather Hill's Sweet 16. It's just so wholesome to see him so happy, and it's also well deserved that Greg and Rodrick are friends this movie because they spent the last 2 building their relationship. Automatic S for this movie. Alright, what's next? Diary. The Long Haul. Where do I even begin with this one? I knew this was coming and I still decided to make the video anyway. So the main complaint I have with this movie is that everything. Everything is wrong. Everything doesn't feel right. The cast, the story, the acting, the writing, the originality, the concept, I hate it. The thing with this movie is that it's so bland that it doesn't even have to be a Diary of Wimpy Kid movie. In fact, if you watch this movie without thinking it's a Wimpy Kid movie, you'd probably have a good time watching it. I honestly think the movie is okay, but the thing is that it's labeled as a Wimpy Kid reboot, and that angers me. I do feel like they could have done better with the cast, because the cast here feels like they didn't even try at all. They also didn't really do a good job as acting like the classic cast in the original trilogy. Here it just feels they're being held at gunpoint, being forced to read a script. And don't even get me started on the plot. They somehow managed to ruin a movie based on a book. Like, are you kidding? The book literally already exists and it was a massive hit. All they had to do was copy from the book and they'd succeed regardless. And they still managed to fail at that. They somehow turned a family road trip movie into a YouTube comedy gaming movie. Okay, maybe that was a bit of an exaggeration, but they didn't have to include this Digby guy. This movie gets a G for get in the bin. Well, that's about every book in the series, so thank you for... Eldrick, I think you forgot something. Forget something? What are you talking about? You're not talking about the Rowley Jefferson Journal, right? You know what? Fine. So, I wasn't originally supposed to review this book, but since I actually have it, I might as well include it in the video. So, this book was apparently meant to be Rowley's diary, but Greg stepped in and somehow convinced him to make it about his biography. So, for the whole book, Rowley just basically says stories about him and Greg, which is pretty sad because you have to keep in mind that this is Rowley's journal. Listen, love him or hate him, you have to agree that Rowley's friendship with Greg Heffley is absolutely toxic. And that's what you'd expect because Greg is a literal social. Despite Greg's attempt at making Rowley make him his own biography, it still kind of shows how bad of a person Greg is, which is kind of ironic and funny. After reading this book though, all it really made me feel and think was how much of a bad person Greg Heffley is. I kind of just sat there and felt sorry for Rowley throughout the whole book. It was actually kind of sad when you think about it, but anyway, I rank this as a D tier book. Well, would you look at that? All 16 books and the 3 movies, not including the other one, and the Rowley book ranked all in one video. I hope you enjoyed watching this because I definitely did enjoy making it. I know this video was a bit weird if you enjoy watching my other type of content, but I'm just trying new stuff out. If this video does blow up, then I guess I'm gonna become a Diary of Wimpy Kid channel. I seriously hope that doesn't happen. At least I can finally say that I will be the only one on YouTube to have ranked every single Diary of a Wimpy Kid book and movie. I'm pretty sure there's a new book coming out on October 21st and a Disney Plus movie on December 3rd. God, please kill me.